So after Jesus rode through the streets of Jerusalem, he and his 12 disciples went to the upper room where they sat together to eat their special Passover meal. Jesus knew this would be his last night on earth. He told his disciples that he would soon leave them, and they felt very sad. As Jesus sat at the table, his heart was filled with sadness too. Jesus knew that Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, didn't really love him, but only pretended to love him. Jesus also knew that Judas would tell Jesus' enemies how they could find Jesus. Jesus looked at his disciples and said, "One of you will betray me." That means one of you will sell me over to my enemies and hurt me very badly. Great sadness swept over all the disciples, and they felt so sad. Which one of them would do such a thing to hurt Jesus? One by one they asked him, "Am I the one?" And Jesus said, "It is one of you 12 eating with me now." John got closer to Jesus and said to him, "Lord, tell us who it is." So Jesus dipped some bread into a dish and handed it to Judas. And then Judas looked at him and said, "Master, is it I?" Jesus said, "Yes. And what you are going to do, go do it quickly." Jesus knew what Jesus would do. He knew all about Judas. Remember that Jesus knows everything about us. He knows about our thoughts. And so Jesus finished the Last Supper with Judas, and Judas was gone. Quietly, Jesus said to his disciples, "I will soon be going away from you, and I want you to remember what I have done for you." Jesus told the disciples many things about himself. Do you know why God the Son, Jesus, came to earth from heaven? It was to save us of our sins. Do you know why he was born as a tiny baby and grew up to be a man? It's because God had a very special reason for Jesus to be on earth. Do you remember? God created the world and the people in it so that they would love God and serve him. But instead of obeying God, people chose to disobey him and do whatever they wanted. God didn't forget about people, though. He wanted to make a way for them to have forgiveness of their sins and the bad things they do. Sin must be punished. So God the Father sent God the Son, Jesus, to take the punishment for all the sins of all the people in the world. And Jesus knew that his time on earth was nearly over. He knew his enemies were making plans to kill him. And the disciples tried to listen carefully to all that Jesus said, but they just didn't understand what was about to happen. Soon they all left the upper room and walked through the streets of Jerusalem until they got to a garden. There in the garden, called Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus asked his disciples, "Pray." Jesus then went further into the garden and he talked with his Father. His disciples were so tired they fell asleep. The Bible tells us the things that Jesus prayed about. It was time for him to do the very special work that God had sent him to do. There in the garden, Jesus asked God the Father if there was any other way that we could have our sins forgiven. Jesus said he would do whatever God wanted him to do, even if it was hard. And when he finished praying, Jesus knew he still needed to take the punishment for our sins. God sent an angel from heaven to comfort and strengthen Jesus. Then Jesus woke the disciples because his enemies had come to